The scent of roses mocked Natalie Grayson as she stood alone in the small white church, her wedding dress suddenly feeling like a shroud instead of a celebration. The guests had dispersed 30 minutes ago, their pitying glances burning into her memory as they filed out into the dusty streets of Jamestown, California. It was June of 1878, and what should have been the happiest day of her 22 years had become a nightmare that would haunt her forever. "He is not coming, Miss Grayson," the Reverend had finally said, his weathered face full of sympathy. "I am truly sorry." She had nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Thomas had left her. The man she had trusted, the banker's son who had courted her properly for 8 months, who had promised her a good life, had simply vanished. No note, no explanation, nothing. His family had left town 2 days prior, she learned from hushed whispers. Debts, someone said. Scandal, said another. Either way, Thomas Wellington had run like a coward, leaving her to face the humiliation alone. Now Natalie sat in the front pew, her veil pushed back, staring at the altar where she should have taken her vows. The flowers she had spent weeks arranging with her mother seemed to wilt before her eyes. Her mother had gone home in tears. Her father had stormed off to the saloon, rage painting his usually gentle features crimson. Her younger sister had tried to comfort her, but Natalie had sent her away, needing solitude to process the devastation. The church door creaked open and she did not bother to turn around, probably the Reverend coming to tell her she needed to leave so he could lock up. "Madam," the voice was unfamiliar, deep and hesitant. Natalie turned to see a cowboy standing in the doorway, hat in his hands, silhouetted by the afternoon sun streaming through. He was tall and lean, wearing dusty trail clothes and worn boots. His dark hair was longer than fashionable, curling slightly at his collar, and his face was tanned from long days under the sun. "The church is closed," she said quietly, turning back to stare at the altar. "I can see that." He stepped inside, his footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. "I was just passing through town, heard some folks talking about what happened. Thought maybe you could use some company. I want to be alone. No offense, madam, but I do not think that is true." He walked down the aisle slowly, not approaching too close but near enough that she could see him clearly. He had kind eyes, she noticed, a warm brown that held genuine concern. "Name's Ethan Cole. I have been working cattle drives between here and Nevada." "Natalie Grayson," she replied automatically, then wondered why she was bothering with introductions. "As you can see, my wedding did not quite work out as planned." Ethan sat down in the pew across the aisle from her, keeping a respectful distance. "The man's a fool." Despite herself, Natalie felt a tiny spark of something that was not quite amusement but close. "You do not even know me." "Do not need to. Any man who would leave a woman waiting at the altar is a fool, plain and simple." He set his hat on the bench beside him. "Especially a woman as beautiful as you, please do not." Natalie's voice cracked slightly. "I cannot bear false flattery right now. It is not false." Ethan's tone was matter of fact, no flowery nonsense or exaggeration. "I am just stating what I see, but that is not really the point. The point is you deserved better than what happened here today." Natalie felt tears burning behind her eyes again. She had cried so much already that she thought she had none left, but apparently her body disagreed. "Everyone in town witnessed my humiliation. How am I supposed to face them? How am I supposed to go to the general store or walk down the street without seeing pity in every face?" "You hold your head high," Ethan said firmly. "You did nothing wrong. The shame is his, not yours." "That is easy to say." She stood abruptly, pacing toward the altar and back. The heavy skirts of her wedding dress rustled with each step. "But people will talk. They always do. They will say I was not good enough, that I did something to drive him away. They will whisper that I am damaged goods now, that no decent man will want me. Ethan stood as well, his expression serious. Then those people are not worth your time or concern. You do not understand what it is like for a woman in my position. You are right, I do not. He acknowledged this without defensiveness. I am just a cowboy. I drift from place to place, work hard, save what I can. I do not have to worry about reputation the way you do, but I know something about being judged unfairly, and I know that the only opinion that truly matters is your own. Natalie studied him more carefully now. There was something genuine about this stranger, something that made her want to trust him even though every instinct told her to protect her battered heart. Why did you really come here? You said you were just passing through. I was loading supplies at the general store when I heard what happened. The owner's wife was telling someone about the abandoned bride at the church. Ethan met her gaze steadily. I suppose I came because I know what it is like to feel alone, thought maybe I could help somehow. How could you possibly help? The question came out sharper than she intended, born of pain rather than malice. Ethan was quiet for a moment, then spoke words that would change everything. I could marry you, right here, right now, if you want. Natalie stared at him, certain she had misheard. What? I will marry you right here, Ethan repeated, his voice steady and sure. If you want to show this town that you are not some pitiful abandoned woman, if you want to walk out of this church married like you planned, I will stand up there with you and say the vows. You are insane. But even as she said it, something fluttered in her chest. Hope, maybe, or just the desperate desire to salvage something from this disaster. Maybe. A small smile tugged at his lips, but I am also serious. Look, I know this is sudden. I know you do not know me from Adam. But I am a decent man. I do not drink to excess. I do not gamble, and I have never raised a hand to anyone who did not deserve it. I have some money saved, enough to buy a piece of land and start a ranch. I was planning to settle down somewhere anyway. You cannot just marry a complete stranger. Natalie's heart was racing now, her mind spinning with the impossibility of what he was suggesting. People do it all the time. Mail-order brides, arranged marriages, marriages of convenience. This world is not always about love, madam. Sometimes it is about practicality and making the best of a situation. Ethan stepped closer, his expression earnest. I am not promising you a fairy tale, but I am promising you respect, partnership, and a chance to hold your head high when you walk out of here. This is madness. It is an option, he corrected gently. You can say no and I will walk right back out that door, or you can say yes and we can figure out the rest as we go. Natalie's thoughts were a chaotic whirlwind. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was insane, that marrying a stranger was even more foolish than waiting for a man who had abandoned her. But another part of her, the part that was tired of being hurt and humiliated, whispered that maybe this was exactly what she needed. I do not love you, she said bluntly. I do not love you either, Ethan replied with equal honesty. But I like what I have seen so far. You have spirit, even in the middle of heartbreak. That counts for something. What would people say? They will say plenty regardless. At least this way you control the narrative. He had a point, she realized. You can tell them I am someone you knew before, that this was planned all along, or you can tell them the truth. Either way, you walk out of here married. Natalie looked around the church, at the flowers and the decorations and the altar where she had imagined pledging herself to Thomas. That dream was dead, but maybe, just maybe, a different dream could take its place. If I say yes, she began slowly, what would you expect from me? Honestly, I have not thought that far ahead. Ethan admitted. I suppose we would need to talk about where to live, what kind of life we want to build. As for the marriage itself, I would not force anything on you. We could take our time, get to know each other properly. You would marry me but not expect your husband's rights. Natalie felt her cheeks warm at the indelicate question, but she needed to know. I expect respect and partnership, Ethan said carefully. The rest can develop naturally if it is meant to. I am not the kind of man who would force himself on any woman, wife or otherwise. Something in Natalie's chest loosened slightly. She believed him, which was perhaps foolish, but there was something in his eyes that spoke of integrity. This is the craziest thing I have ever considered. That is not a no. She laughed then, a slightly hysterical sound that echoed in the empty church. No, it is not a no. Taking a deep breath, Natalie made a decision that would either save her or destroy her. Yes, yes, I will marry you, Ethan Cole. His smile was warm and genuine, reaching those kind brown eyes. You will not regret this, I promise. I might. But she was smiling too, just a little. Should we find the Reverend? I will get him. Ethan headed for the door that led to the Reverend's small office. You just take a moment. Breathe. Natalie did as he suggested, drawing in long breaths as she tried to process what was happening. 20 minutes ago she had been wallowing in misery. Now she was about to marry a complete stranger. It was insane. It was reckless. It was possibly the best decision she had ever made. Reverend Matthews emerged looking confused with Ethan right behind him. Miss Grayson, I thought you had gone home. I am still here, Reverend, and I would like you to perform a wedding ceremony. The elderly man looked between Natalie and Ethan, comprehension dawning slowly. You two are getting married, but you only just met. We knew each other before, Natalie lied smoothly, surprising herself with how easily the words came. Ethan and I corresponded through letters. He was supposed to arrive next month, but when he heard about Thomas, he came straight away. I could not let her suffer that humiliation, Ethan added, playing along perfectly. I love her too much for that. The Reverend still looked skeptical, but he was a kind man who clearly wanted to believe them. Are you certain about this, Natalie, after what you have been through today? I am certain. And to her surprise, she was. Maybe not about Ethan specifically, since she knew nothing about him but about the choice itself. This felt right in a way that her engagement to Thomas never quite had. Very well. Reverend Matthews moved to the altar, opening his prayer book. Let us begin. Natalie took her place at the altar and Ethan stood beside her. He was taller than Thomas, she noticed, and broader in the shoulders from hard work. His hands were calloused when he took hers, but his touch was gentle. The Reverend began the familiar words, and Natalie focused on breathing steadily. When it came time for the vows, Ethan's voice was clear and firm as he promised to love, honor, and cherish her. Her own voice shook slightly but held strong as she made the same promises to this stranger who had offered her salvation. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Reverend Matthews closed his book, looking between them with a mixture of confusion and hope. You may kiss your bride, Ethan. Ethan looked at Natalie, a question in his eyes. She nodded slightly, giving permission. He leaned down slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away if she wanted. When his lips touched hers, the kiss was brief and chaste, but Natalie felt something spark between them. Not love, not yet, but possibility. Congratulations, the Reverend said, though he still sounded uncertain. I suppose I will need to update the marriage record. Please do, Natalie said, her voice stronger now. Mr. and Mrs. Ethan Cole. The name felt strange in her mouth, but not unpleasant. Mrs. Cole. Not Mrs. Wellington, as she had practiced writing 100 times in her diary. Mrs. Cole. After Reverend Matthews finished the paperwork, and they had both signed the marriage certificate, Natalie and Ethan walked out of the church together. The sun was lower now, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The streets of Jamestown were busy with the usual evening activity, people finishing their daily business before heading home for supper. Several people stopped and stared when they saw Natalie emerge in her wedding dress, now on the arm of a different man entirely. She could see the gossip spreading like wildfire, people leaning together to whisper behind their hands. "Let them talk," Ethan murmured, tucking her hand into the crook of his arm. "You are a married woman now. That is all that matters." "I should tell my parents," Natalie said, suddenly realizing the enormity of what she had done. "They will be beside themselves." "Would you like me to come with you?" she considered, then shook her head. "Let me speak to them alone first. Where should I meet you after?" "I have a room at the boarding house on 3rd Street, Mrs. Henderson's place." He paused, then added, "I can get a second room for tonight if you would prefer." The consideration touched her. "That would be appreciated, thank you, of course." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "Take all the time you need with your family. I will be waiting whenever you are ready." Natalie walked home in a daze, her wedding dress attracting stares from everyone she passed. The Grayson house was a modest but well-maintained home on the edge of town, with a small garden that her mother tended lovingly. She could see lamplight in the windows as she approached. Her mother answered the door, eyes red from crying. "Natalie, darling, I have been so worried. You should not have stayed at that church alone." Then she noticed Natalie's expression. "What happened? You look different. May I come in? I need to speak with you and Father." Her father was in the parlor, still dressed in his wedding suit, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked up when Natalie entered, anger and pain warring on his face. "That coward Wellington. If I ever see him again, I will personally—" "Father, please." Natalie sat down, smoothing her skirts. "I have something to tell you both." Her mother sat beside her, taking her hand. "What is it, dear?" "I got married today." The silence that followed was deafening. Her father set down his glass carefully. "What did you say?" "I married a man named Ethan Cole. The Reverend performed the ceremony about an hour ago." "Ethan Cole." Her mother's voice was faint. "I do not know anyone by that name." "He is a cowboy, works cattle drives. We have been corresponding through letters." The lies came easier now, building on the foundation she had laid with the Reverend. "He was supposed to arrive next month, but when he heard about Thomas, he came immediately." Her father stood, his face purple with renewed anger. "You married a stranger. On the same day you were supposed to marry Thomas. Have you lost your mind?" "No, Father, I think I have finally found it." Natalie stood as well, facing him squarely. "Ethan is a good man. He offered me a way out of the humiliation Thomas caused, and I took it. You know nothing about him." Her father was shouting now. "He could be anyone, anything. He could be a coward who runs away from his obligations," Natalie shot back. "But he is not. He stood up in that church and married me when he did not have to. That tells me more about his character than 8 months of Thomas's pretty words ever did." Her mother was crying again, torn between supporting her daughter and fearing for her future. "Oh, Natalie, what have you done?" "What I had to do." Natalie's voice softened. "I know this is sudden and frightening, but I need you to trust me. Ethan is a good man, I can feel it, and I would rather build a life with a good stranger than pine away for a false promise." Her father sat back down heavily. "Where is this man now?" "At Mrs. Henderson's boarding house. He is getting rooms for us." "Bring him to dinner tomorrow," her father said gruffly. "I want to meet the man who married my daughter in secret." "It was not in secret, Father. We married in the church with Reverend Matthews officiating. Everything was proper and legal." "Tomorrow," he repeated firmly. 6 o'clock. Natalie nodded, recognizing this as the best she could hope for right now. "We will be here." She kissed her mother's cheek and went upstairs to her childhood bedroom, needing to change out of the wedding dress and gather some of her belongings. Looking around the familiar room, she felt both sadness and anticipation. This morning she had woken up here as Natalie Grayson, engaged to be married. Now she was Natalie Cole, married to a man she had met only hours ago. She changed into a simple blue dress and packed a carpet bag with necessities. Her wedding dress she left hanging in the wardrobe, unable to decide what to do with it. Part of her wanted to burn it, but another part recognized it as expensive fabric that could be repurposed. When she arrived at Mrs. Henderson's boarding house, Ethan was sitting on the porch, still in his trail clothes. He stood when he saw her, a smile crossing his face. "How did it go?" "About as well as could be expected. My father wants to meet you tomorrow for dinner." "That is fair." Ethan took her carpet bag. "I got us 2 rooms, side by side." Mrs. Henderson was very curious about why a married couple would need separate rooms. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, more or less, that we only just got married and wanted to take things slowly." Natalie felt a rush of gratitude for his thoughtfulness. "Thank you." Mrs. Henderson herself appeared then, a plump woman with sharp eyes and a warm smile. "So you are the new Mrs. Cole. Congratulations on your marriage, dear." "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. Your husband has the rooms at the top of the stairs, first 2 doors on the right. Breakfast is at 7, dinner at 6. No loud noises after 9 o'clock and absolutely no impropriety under my roof." "We understand," Ethan said smoothly. "Thank you for accommodating us on such short notice." They climbed the narrow stairs to the 2nd floor, and Ethan showed Natalie to her room first. It was small but clean, with a single bed, a washstand, and a small wardrobe. His room next door was identical. "Are you hungry?" Ethan asked. "I could ask Mrs. Henderson about getting some supper sent up." "I do not think I could eat anything right now." The events of the day were catching up with Natalie, exhaustion pulling at her bones. "I just need to sleep, I think." "Of course." He lingered in the doorway, seeming reluctant to leave. "Natalie, I want you to know that I meant what I said at the church. You will not regret this. I hope you are right." She managed a small smile. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night." After he left, Natalie prepared for bed mechanically, washing her face and brushing out her hair. When she finally lay down, she expected to spend hours staring at the ceiling, her mind too active for sleep. Instead, exhaustion claimed her almost immediately, pulling her into dreamless darkness. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of activity from downstairs. For a moment she was disoriented, wondering why she was not in her own bed. Then memory flooded back. The abandoned wedding, Ethan's proposal, the hasty ceremony. She was married. A soft knock at her door made her jump. "Natalie, are you awake?" Ethan's voice, her husband's voice. "Just a moment." She dressed quickly in the same blue dress from yesterday, wishing she had packed more of her things. When she opened the door, Ethan was there looking freshly washed, his hair still damp. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected, actually." She stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind her. "What about you?" "Like a rock." He offered his arm. "Shall we go down for breakfast? Mrs. Henderson makes excellent biscuits." The dining room was full of other boarders, all of whom turned to stare when Natalie and Ethan entered. She recognized a few faces from around town and could practically see the gossip wheels turning in their minds. They ate quickly, making small talk about inconsequential things. Afterward, Ethan suggested a walk, and Natalie agreed, needing to escape the curious stares. Jamestown was fully awake now, with people going about their daily business. The general store was open, the blacksmith's hammer rang out, and children played in the street. Natalie steeled herself against the stares and whispers as they walked. "Tell me about yourself," she said as they strolled toward the edge of town. "I should probably know more about the man I married," Ethan chuckled. That is fair. Let me see. I am 26 years old, originally from Texas. My parents died when I was young. Fever took them both within a week of each other. I was raised by my uncle, who taught me everything about working cattle. I have been doing trail drives for the past 8 years, saving money with the goal of buying my own ranch someday. Do you have any other family? A sister, married and living in Colorado with her husband and 3 children. We write occasionally but do not see each other often. He glanced at her. What about you? Besides your parents, who else is in your family? A younger sister, Clara. She is 19 and works at the millinery shop. We are very close, or we were before all this happened. Why would that change? Because I did not tell her about you, about us. I lied to her just like I lied to everyone else. The guilt sat heavy in Natalie's stomach. You could tell her the truth, Ethan suggested gently, if you think she can keep it to herself. Natalie considered this. Clara was trustworthy and keeping secrets from her felt wrong. Maybe I will. They walked in silence for a while, leaving the main part of town behind. The landscape around Jamestown was beautiful in its own harsh way, rolling hills dotted with oak trees and chaparral. In the distance, the Sierra Nevada mountains rose majestically. It is pretty country, Ethan observed. Different from Texas, but pretty. Have you been to California before? A few times on cattle drives, but I have never spent much time here. He paused, then added, I was thinking if you are agreeable we could look at some properties for sale. Start building that ranch I mentioned. Here, in Jamestown. Natalie felt a flutter of something that might have been hope. Why not? You have family here, roots, unless you would rather go somewhere else. No, I would like to stay. She had not realized how much she wanted that until this moment. But can you afford land here? California property is expensive. I have been saving for 8 years, remember? I live frugally on the trail, do not spend money on nonsense. I have enough for a decent piece of land and some cattle to start with. They talked about possibilities as they walked, and Natalie found herself getting caught up in the vision Ethan was painting. A ranch of their own, building something from nothing, creating a life together. It sounded almost too good to be true. What about today? She asked as they turned back toward town. We have dinner with my parents at 6. What should we do until then? I need to see about selling my horse and gear, get some proper clothes for meeting your father, and you probably want to get more of your things from your parents' house. They spent the afternoon separately, Natalie gathering her belongings while trying to avoid too many questions from her mother and sister, Ethan conducting his business in town. They met again at 5:30, giving themselves time to walk to the Grayson house. Ethan was wearing new clothes, a simple but well-made suit that made him look less like a cowboy and more like a respectable gentleman. His hair was neatly combed and he had shaved. You look very handsome, Natalie said honestly. You look beautiful. His eyes were warm as they took her in. She wore a green dress that brought out her hazel eyes, and she had taken extra care with her hair. Her father answered the door himself, his expression stern as he looked Ethan up and down. So you are the man who married my daughter? Yes, sir. Ethan Cole. Ethan extended his hand. Thank you for inviting us to dinner. Her father hesitated, then shook his hand firmly. Come in. Dinner is almost ready. The meal was tense at first, with her father asking pointed questions about Ethan's background, his finances, his intentions. Ethan answered everything honestly and directly, not trying to embellish or hide anything. Gradually, Natalie could see her father's hostility easing. You seem like a decent man, her father finally admitted over dessert, but I cannot fathom why you would marry a woman you barely knew. Ethan glanced at Natalie, and she gave him a slight nod. If they were going to tell anyone the truth, it should be her family. The truth is, sir, I did not know your daughter at all before yesterday. We did not correspond through letters. I was in town loading supplies when I heard what happened at the church. I went there, saw Natalie alone and heartbroken, and I offered to marry her on the spot. Her mother gasped. Her father's face turned red. Clara, who had been quiet throughout dinner, leaned forward with wide eyes. You married a complete stranger. Her father's voice was dangerously quiet. I did. Natalie spoke before Ethan could, and I would do it again. Thomas showed me that pretty words and long courtships mean nothing if there is no integrity behind them. Ethan showed me more honor in 5 minutes than Thomas did in 8 months. But you know nothing about him, her mother protested. I know he is kind. I know he is thoughtful. I know he kept his word about giving me my own room and not forcing himself on me. I know he has been saving money for 8 years to buy a ranch. I know he treats me with respect. Natalie reached over and took Ethan's hand. I know that he married me when he had absolutely no reason to, just to save me from humiliation. That tells me everything I need to know about who he is. Her father was silent for a long moment. And what do you plan to do now? Buy some land, start a ranch, build a life, Ethan said. With your permission, I would like to court your daughter properly now that we are married. Take her to dinner, on walks. Let her get to know me the way she should have been able to before the wedding. Despite the tension, Natalie's mother smiled at that. You are going to court her after marrying her. It seems like the right thing to do. Ethan smiled back. I want her to have the romance she deserves, even if it is in the wrong order. Clara spoke up for the first time. I think it is wonderful. Thomas was always so pompous and boring. Ethan seems much nicer. Clara, their mother scolded, but there was no real heat in it. The rest of the dinner passed in much better spirits. Her father was not completely won over, Natalie could tell, but he was warming to Ethan. By the time they left, he even shook Ethan's hand again and told him to take care of his daughter. That went better than I expected, Ethan said as they walked back to the boarding house under the stars. My father likes you. He would never admit it, but I could tell. Natalie felt lighter than she had since yesterday morning. Thank you for being honest with them. Lying to the reverend and the town is one thing. Lying to your family is another. He looked down at her. I meant what I said about courting you properly. Would you like to have dinner with me tomorrow evening? There is a restaurant near the hotel that is supposed to be quite good. I would like that very much. When they reached the boarding house, Ethan walked her to her door. They stood in the hallway, suddenly shy with each other. Good night, Natalie. Good night, Ethan. He hesitated, then leaned down and kissed her cheek softly. Sleep well. Natalie went to bed with her cheek tingling where his lips had touched. And for the first time since this whole affair began, she felt genuinely hopeful about the future. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Ethan spent his days looking at properties and making plans for the ranch, while Natalie helped her mother around the house and visited with Clara. In the evenings, Ethan would call on her, and they would have dinner or take walks, talking and getting to know each other. She learned that he loved to read, which surprised her for a cowboy. He had a collection of books he had gathered over the years, everything from Shakespeare to Mark Twain. He was surprisingly well educated, having attended school through the 8th grade before his parents died. He learned that she played piano and loved to sing, that she had a secret talent for drawing, and that she had always dreamed of traveling even though she had never been more than 50 miles from Jamestown. Maybe someday we can travel together, Ethan said one evening as they sat on a bench overlooking the valley. Once the ranch is established and running smoothly. I would like that. Natalie leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture that had become natural between them. Where would you want to go? San Francisco, maybe. I have heard it is quite a city. Or we could go back east, see New York and Boston. That sounds wonderful. They were quiet for a moment, watching the sun set over the mountains. Then Ethan said, "I found a property I want to show you tomorrow. It is about 5 miles from town, 200 acres with a creek running through it. There is a small house already built, needs some work, but it is livable. The price is fair." Natalie sat up, excited. "You really want to buy it?" "I want you to see it first. It would be your home too. You should have a say." The next morning, Ethan rented a wagon and they drove out to the property. It was even more beautiful than he had described, rolling grassland with clusters of oak trees and a clear creek that sparkled in the sunshine. The house was small but sturdy, with 2 bedrooms, a kitchen, and a sitting room. "We could add on later," Ethan said as they explored the empty rooms. "Another bedroom or 2, maybe a proper dining room, whatever you want." Natalie walked through the house, imagining furniture and curtains and all the touches that would make it a home. "It is perfect." "You really think so?" "I do." She turned to face him, her heart full. "Let us buy it." Ethan's smile was brilliant. "I will make an offer today." Within a week, the property was theirs. They spent their days cleaning the house and making plans for improvements. Natalie's mother donated some furniture she had in storage, and Clara helped make curtains and linens. Even Natalie's father pitched in, helping Ethan repair the barn and build some new fencing. The town's opinion of their sudden marriage had shifted from scandalized to romantic. People talked about the cowboy who had rescued the abandoned bride, turning a story of humiliation into a fairy tale. Natalie did not bother to correct them. Let them think what they wanted. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their new home watching the stars come out, Ethan took Natalie's hand. "I know we have only been married for a month," he said carefully, "but I need you to know something. I am falling in love with you." Natalie's breath caught. She had been feeling something too, a growing warmth in her chest whenever she looked at him, a loneliness when they were apart. "I think I am falling in love with you too." He turned to her, cupping her face gently in his hands. "May I kiss you?" "Really kiss you?" In answer, Natalie closed the distance between them. This kiss was nothing like the chaste peck at their wedding. It was deep and passionate, full of all the feelings they had been dancing around for weeks. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "I think," Natalie said softly, "that we do not need 2 separate rooms anymore." Ethan's eyes darkened with desire and something deeper, something tender. "Are you sure?" "I am sure." They went inside together, and for the first time their marriage became real in every sense of the word. Ethan was gentle and patient, making sure Natalie felt safe and cherished. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the bedroom that was now truly theirs, Natalie felt a peace she had never known before. "No regrets?" Ethan asked, trailing his fingers down her arm. "Not a single one." She kissed his chest. "You are the best impulsive decision I ever made," he laughed, the sound rumbling through him. "You are the best impulsive decision I ever made too." The summer passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. They bought cattle, hired a couple of ranch hands, and started building their herd. Natalie learned to ride better, how to help with the branding, how to manage the ranch books. Ethan proved to be a patient teacher and a devoted husband. In the fall, Natalie realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but had not been certain until the doctor confirmed it. She told Ethan that evening as they sat down to dinner. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession: shock, joy, wonder, and then concern. "Are you happy about this?" "I am," and she was. 6 months ago she would have been terrified, but now with Ethan she felt ready. "Are you?" "I am thrilled." He came around the table and pulled her into his arms. "We are going to have a baby." They told her family the next Sunday at dinner, and her mother cried happy tears while her father looked pleased despite his best efforts to appear stern. Clara immediately started planning what she would make for the baby. "This is all so different from how I imagined my life would be," Natalie said to Clara one afternoon as they worked on baby clothes together. "But it is so much better." "You are lucky," Clara said wistfully. "Ethan adores you, anyone can see it." "I adore him too." It was true. What had started as a desperate bargain had become the deepest love Natalie had ever known. "I cannot imagine my life without him now." Winter came, and Natalie's belly grew round. Ethan fussed over her constantly, insisting she rest more and do less. She found it both annoying and endearing. The ranch was doing well, better than they had hoped for their first year. They had already started planning expansions for the following spring. In March of 1879, during a late winter storm, Natalie went into labor. The midwife came, along with Natalie's mother and sister. Ethan paced the sitting room, wearing a path in the floorboards as he listened to Natalie's cries. After 12 hours of labor, their son was born, healthy and loud. When the midwife finally let Ethan into the bedroom, he found Natalie exhausted but radiant, cradling a red-faced infant. "We have a son," she said softly. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, looking down at the tiny person they had created. "He is perfect. You are perfect." He kissed her forehead. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but had not decided on anything definite. Looking at her son's face, Natalie suddenly knew. "James, after your father." Ethan's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "Are you certain?" "I am certain." Little James Cole was christened a month later with half the town in attendance. The ranch had become known for its quality cattle, and the Cole name was respected in Jamestown. No one remembered anymore about the scandal of their hasty wedding. They only saw a successful young couple building a good life together. That spring, an unexpected visitor arrived at the ranch. Natalie was hanging laundry when she saw a familiar figure riding up the path. Her heart sank. Thomas Wellington. He looked much the worse for wear, his clothes shabby and his face gaunt. When he dismounted, he removed his hat nervously. "Natalie, I know you probably do not want to see me, but I had to come." Ethan emerged from the barn, alerted by the sound of a strange horse. His expression hardened when he recognized Thomas. "What are you doing here?" Ethan's voice was cold. "I came to apologize." Thomas looked between them. "I heard you got married, that you have a son. I wanted to say I am sorry for what I did." "Your apology is a year too late," Natalie said, surprised by how little she felt. "No anger, no hurt, just indifference." "Why did you leave?" "My father's bank was failing. We were in debt, would have lost everything. He arranged for us to flee before the creditors could come after us." Thomas twisted his hat in his hands. "I know I should have told you, should have faced it, but I was a coward." "Yes, you were." Natalie felt Ethan step up beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "But I do not care anymore. You did me a favor by leaving, even if you did not mean to." Thomas looked at Ethan. "You are a lucky man." "I know." Ethan put his arm around Natalie's waist. "And you need to leave. Now." "Of course." Thomas mounted his horse, looking down at them one last time. "I truly am sorry. I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me someday." "I already have," Natalie said. "Not for your sake, but for mine. I will not carry anger for you anymore. But I also never want to see you again." Thomas nodded and rode away. They watched until he disappeared down the road. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked quietly. "I am more than all right." Natalie turned to face him. "Seeing him just reminded me how grateful I am that he left. If he had married me, I would never have found you." "I love you," Ethan said, kissing her softly. "I love you too." The years passed quickly after that. They had 2 more children, a daughter named Sarah and another son named Matthew. The ranch grew and prospered, becoming one of the largest in the area. Ethan proved to be as good a father as he was a husband, patient and loving with their children. Natalie's father, who had been skeptical of Ethan at first, became one of his closest friends. They spent hours together, working on various projects and solving the world's problems over whiskey. Her mother doted on her grandchildren, and Clara eventually married a nice man who worked at the bank, settling just a few miles down the road. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised Natalie with a trip to San Francisco, just as he had promised all those years ago. They left the children with her parents and took the train to the city, spending a week exploring and enjoying each other's company away from the demands of the ranch. As they stood on the wharf watching the ships in the harbor, Ethan pulled Natalie close. "You remember that day in the church?" he asked. "When I offered to marry you, of course. How could I forget? I have never told you this, but when I walked into that church and saw you sitting there in your wedding dress, looking so lost and heartbroken, something in my chest just cracked wide open. I knew in that moment that I wanted to protect you, to make you happy, even though I did not know you at all." Natalie looked up at him, this man who had saved her in more ways than one. "I thought you were insane," he laughed. I still am a little, but I do not regret a single moment." "Neither do I." She kissed him, tasting salt air and coffee and the promise of many more years together. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Ethan Cole. You are my everything, Natalie Cole." They returned to Jamestown refreshed and happy, ready to dive back into their busy life. The ranch continued to thrive, and their children grew strong and healthy. James proved to have a natural talent with horses, while Sarah inherited her mother's artistic abilities. Matthew was still too young to show his inclinations, but he was a happy, curious child who kept everyone on their toes. When Natalie turned 35, Ethan threw her a surprise party at the ranch. Friends and family came from all over, filling their home with laughter and love. As she looked around at everyone gathered there, at the life she had built with this man who had been a stranger 13 years ago, Natalie felt her heart overflow with gratitude. That night, after everyone had gone home and the children were asleep, Natalie and Ethan sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the night air was sweet with the scent of wildflowers. "Do you ever think about how different your life would be if I had not walked into that church?" Ethan asked. "Sometimes," Natalie admitted, "but not with regret, never with regret. Every path I did not take led me to this one, to you, to our children, to this life. I would not change a single thing. Not even Thomas leaving you at the altar, especially not that." She squeezed his hand. "Because it brought me to you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. After a while, Ethan said, "I love you more today than I did yesterday, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is my promise to you, for every day we have left. And I promise to keep choosing you every day for the rest of my life." Natalie leaned her head on his shoulder. "We have built something beautiful together, Ethan. We have indeed." As they sat there under the stars, surrounded by the land they had worked so hard to build up, with their children sleeping peacefully inside and a future full of promise ahead of them, Natalie thought about that young woman who had been left at the altar. She had been so devastated, so certain her life was over, but really, it had just begun. The years continued to roll by in a rhythm of seasons and celebrations. James grew into a fine young man, helping run the ranch alongside his father. At 20, he married a sweet girl from town named Emma, and they built a house on the eastern section of the property. Sarah, at 17, was being courted by a lawyer's son, much to Ethan's protective dismay. Matthew, now 13, showed promise as a scholar and talked about attending university someday. Natalie's parents grew older but remained active and involved with their grandchildren. Her father finally admitted to Ethan that he had been wrong about him, that he could not have asked for a better son-in-law. Her mother spent her days spoiling her grandchildren and helping Natalie with the endless work of maintaining such a large household. Clara and her husband had 4 children of their own, and the cousins grew up together, running wild across the ranch during summers and holidays. The Cole Ranch became known not just for its quality cattle but for its hospitality, with friends and family always welcome at the table. When James and Emma had their first child, making Natalie and Ethan grandparents at 43 and 47 respectively, they both marveled at how quickly time had passed. "I still feel like that young cowboy who wandered into a church and made a crazy offer," Ethan said, holding his newborn grandson. "And I still feel like that heartbroken girl who said yes to a stranger," Natalie replied, watching her husband cradle the baby with practiced ease. But look at everything that came from that moment of madness. They named the baby Thomas, and while it gave Natalie a momentary pause, she realized she had long since forgiven her former fiancé. He was nothing but a faded memory now, a footnote in a much larger and happier story. Sarah eventually married her lawyer, and they moved to Sacramento, where he had been offered a partnership in a prestigious firm. Natalie missed her daughter terribly, but was proud of the intelligent, confident woman she had become. Matthew did indeed go to university, studying literature and philosophy, though he always came home for summers to help with the ranch work. The ranch itself had grown to over 500 acres. They had expanded the house twice, adding a proper dining room and several more bedrooms to accommodate their growing family. The original small house where they had first made love, where their children had been born, remained the heart of the home. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children organized a celebration that brought people from all over the county. The governor himself sent a letter of congratulation, praising the Coles for their contributions to California's agricultural development. But for Natalie, the best part of the evening was when Ethan pulled her away from the party and led her down to the creek that ran through their property. "I wanted a moment alone with you," he said, his hair now silver at the temples but his eyes still as warm and kind as they had been that day in the church. "We have created quite a legacy," Natalie observed, looking back at the house lit up with lanterns and full of people they loved. "We have created quite a life," Ethan corrected. "The ranch, the children, all of that is wonderful, but the real achievement is us, Natalie, what we built together." He was right. The ranch would continue after they were gone, passing to their children and grandchildren. But the love they had created, the partnership they had forged from that desperate moment in a church, that was their true legacy. "You remember what you said to me that day?" Natalie asked. "You said I would not regret it. And do you? Not for a single second." She kissed him, this man who had been a stranger and became her everything. "You kept your promise, Ethan Cole, and you kept yours." He held her close. "You held your head high and built a beautiful life. I am so proud of you." They stood by the creek for a long time, holding each other as they had done for a quarter century. The sounds of the party drifted down to them, but they were content in their own world, remembering and planning and simply being together. Eventually, they walked back to the house hand in hand, ready to rejoin their family and friends. As they stepped onto the porch, Natalie paused and looked up at Ethan. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For walking into that church. For offering me hope when I had none. For loving me when you had no reason to. For building this life with me." Ethan smiled, the same smile that had first made her think maybe, just maybe, she could trust him. "Thank you for saying yes." They went inside together, surrounded immediately by children and grandchildren, by friends and neighbors, by the community they had become part of and helped to build. The party went late into the night, full of laughter and music and joy. Later, much later, when everyone had finally gone home and the house was quiet, Natalie and Ethan lay in bed together. The same bed they had shared for 25 years, the bed where they had laughed and fought and made love and made peace. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, noticing the thoughtful expression on her face. "About how different my life could have been. If Thomas had not left me, I would probably be miserable right now, trapped in a loveless marriage with a coward. Instead, I am here with you, surrounded by children and grandchildren, living a life I could never have imagined for myself. Fate works in mysterious ways." "It was not fate," Natalie said firmly. "It was choice. You chose to walk into that church. You chose to offer to marry me. I chose to say yes. We chose to make this work every day, even when it was hard." "It was never that hard," Ethan said, pulling her closer. "Loving you has been the easiest thing I have ever done." "Liar." But she was smiling. "Remember the time I threw a plate at your head because you forgot to tell me you invited 10 ranch hands to dinner? You missed." He grinned at the memory. "Barely. Or the time you decided to buy 50 more head of cattle without discussing it with me first. That turned out well in the end. Or the time," he silenced her with a kiss. "All right, so maybe it was not always easy, but it was always worth it." "It was." Natalie settled against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "It always has been." The years continued their relentless march. Natalie's father passed away peacefully in his sleep at 78, and her mother followed him less than a year later, as if she could not bear to be without him. Natalie grieved but found comfort in knowing they had both lived full lives and had been surrounded by love at the end. James and Emma had 3 more children, firmly establishing the next generation of Coles. Sarah and her husband had 2 children who visited from Sacramento whenever they could. Matthew, to everyone's surprise, fell in love with a fellow student at university and brought her home to meet the family. She was smart and funny and fit right in, and they were married within the year. The ranch continued to prosper under James and Ethan's joint management, though Ethan gradually began to hand over more responsibilities to his son. His body, after decades of hard work, was beginning to slow down. He never complained, but Natalie could see the stiffness in his movements, the way he tired more easily. They spent more time together, taking long walks around the property, reminiscing about their years together. Ethan taught their grandchildren to ride, passing on his knowledge and his love of the land. Natalie took up painting, something she had always wanted to do, and created beautiful landscapes of the ranch and the surrounding countryside. On a warm summer evening in 1903, when Natalie was 66 and Ethan was 70, they sat on their porch watching the sun set over the land they had built together. 25 years had passed since their silver anniversary, 50 years since that fateful day in the church. "I have been thinking," Ethan said, his voice still strong despite his age. "We should renew our vows." Natalie turned to look at him in surprise. "Why?" "Because the first time you did not really know what you were agreeing to. You married a stranger out of desperation. I would like you to marry me again, this time knowing exactly who I am and choosing me anyway." Tears filled Natalie's eyes. After 50 years, this man could still surprise her, still touch her heart in ways she had not thought possible. "I choose you, Ethan Cole. I have chosen you every day for 50 years, and I will choose you every day I have left." "So, is that a yes to renewing our vows?" "It is a yes." They planned a simple ceremony to be held at the ranch with just family present. Their children and grandchildren gathered on a beautiful September afternoon, standing in the same spot where Natalie and Ethan had first kissed by the creek all those years ago. The Reverend was the grandson of the man who had married them originally, and he smiled as he led them through the familiar words. But this time, there was no hesitation, no uncertainty. Their voices were strong and sure as they pledged themselves to each other again. I, Ethan Cole, take you, Natalie Grayson Cole, to be my wife. I promise to love you, honor you, cherish you, and choose you every day for as long as we both shall live. I, Natalie Grayson Cole, take you, Ethan Cole, to be my husband. I promise to love you, honor you, cherish you, and choose you every day for as long as we both shall live. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife again, Ethan kissed Natalie deeply, to the cheers and applause of their family. It was a moment of pure joy, a celebration not just of their marriage, but of everything they had built together. The party that followed was full of music and dancing and storytelling. The grandchildren begged for stories about how their grandparents had met, and Ethan and Natalie took turns telling the tale, finishing each other's sentences as they always did. I walked into the church and saw the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, Ethan would say. I thought he was crazy, Natalie would add with a laugh. I told her I would marry her right there. And somehow I said yes. Best decision either of us ever made. The grandchildren never tired of hearing it, this romantic story of the cowboy and the abandoned bride who had built a life together from nothing but hope and determination. As the years passed, Ethan's health began to fail more noticeably. He developed a persistent cough that the doctor said was from years of breathing trail dust. He moved more slowly, needed more rest. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Natalie never wavered. On a cold winter morning in 1908, Ethan did not wake up. He passed peacefully in his sleep, with Natalie beside him as she had been for 53 years. He was 75 years old. The grief nearly broke Natalie. For over half a century, Ethan had been her partner, her love, her best friend. The ranch felt empty without him, even though it was still full of family. She moved through her days mechanically, unable to find joy in anything. It was her grandson Thomas, now a young man of 25, who finally pulled her out of her grief. "Grandmother," he said one day, sitting beside her on the porch, "grandfather would not want you to give up like this. I know." Natalie's voice was hoarse from crying, "but I do not know how to live without him. You do not have to figure it out all at once, just take it one day at a time." He took her hand. "And remember, he is still here, in this ranch, in our family, in all the stories we tell. He lives on through all of us." Thomas was right. Gradually, Natalie began to heal. She spent time with her children and grandchildren, watching the newest generation of Coles grow up on the land she and Ethan had claimed. She painted, she gardened. She told stories about the cowboy who had saved her in a church all those years ago. She lived to be 82 years old, surrounded by family to the end. In her final days, she spoke often of Ethan, of their life together, of the love that had sustained her through everything. "I will see him soon," she told Sarah, who sat by her bedside holding her hand. "And I will tell him that I never stopped choosing him, not even after he was gone." Natalie passed away peacefully on a spring morning in 1919, and she was buried beside Ethan on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. Their children erected a simple headstone that read, "Ethan and Natalie Cole together in life. Together in eternity he offered his hand. She took a chance." They built a legacy. The ranch remained in the family for generations, passing from parent to child, growing and changing with the times, but always remaining true to the vision Ethan and Natalie had first imagined. The story of the cowboy and the abandoned bride became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. And in the small white church in Jamestown, where two strangers had married on a desperate whim, A plaque was eventually placed commemorating the Cole family's contribution to the community, a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. The legacy they left was not just in land or cattle, or even in their descendants, though those were all significant. Their true legacy was the proof that love can grow from the smallest seed, that courage and choice matter more than circumstance, and that sometimes the best answer to life's challenges is a simple yes. In the end, Natalie had been right when she told Thomas that seeing him again had only made her grateful. If he had not left her at that altar, if he had married her as planned, she would never have known the depth of love that was possible. She would never have experienced the partnership and passion and profound connection that she shared with Ethan. The abandoned bride had found her happy ending, not in spite of her heartbreak, but because of it. And the cowboy who had walked into a church on an impulse had found the love of his life and built a legacy that would last for generations. Their story became more than just family history. It became part of Jamestown's folklore, a romantic tale that gave hope to anyone facing heartbreak or uncertainty. The church where they married became a popular spot for weddings, with couples requesting to stand in the same spot where Ethan and Natalie had taken their unexpected vows. The Cole Ranch continued to thrive well into the 20th century. During World War I, they supplied beef to the military, earning commendations for their service to the country. During the Great Depression, when many ranches failed, the Coles survived through careful management and the strong foundation Ethan had built decades earlier. James's son Matthew took over management of the ranch in the 1930s, and he proved to be as capable as his grandfather had been. He modernized operations while respecting tradition, introducing new breeding techniques and business practices that kept the ranch competitive. His children and grandchildren continued the tradition, each generation adding their own contributions while honoring the legacy of Ethan and Natalie. The original house, expanded and modified over the years, remained the heart of the ranch. The bedroom where Ethan and Natalie had slept for 50 years was preserved as a sort of shrine, with photographs and mementos from their life together. Their great-great-grandchildren would sometimes stand in that room, trying to imagine what it had been like when it all began. The church in Jamestown underwent several renovations over the decades, but the spot where Ethan and Natalie had stood remained marked. A small brass plaque on the floor reads simply, "The Cole Wedding, 1878, and it became tradition for couples marrying there to stand on that exact spot for their vows. Clara's descendants also prospered, and the two family lines remained close through the generations, united by the bond that had formed between two sisters who had supported each other through scandal and joy. Every year on June 15th, the anniversary of that fateful wedding day, the extended Cole and Morrison families would gather for a reunion, celebrating not just Ethan and Natalie's marriage, but the entire legacy they had created. Stories about Ethan and Natalie took on mythical proportions over time. Some said Ethan had been a famous gunslinger who had given up his wild ways for love. Others claimed Natalie had been the most beautiful woman in California, turning down dozens of suitors before fate brought her the right man. The truth, as their children would remind people, was both simpler and more profound. They had been ordinary people who made an extraordinary choice and then worked every day to honor that choice. The values they had lived by integrity, hard work, family, and love became the foundation of the Cole family culture. Each new generation was raised hearing the story of how it all began, learning that sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as disasters, and that saying yes to possibility can change everything. In 1978, the Cole family held a massive celebration for the centennial of Ethan and Natalie's marriage. Descendants came from all over the country, some from families who had long since left ranching but who still felt connected to the legacy. They gathered at the ranch, now one of the oldest continuously operating ranches in California, and shared memories and stories late into the night. The church held a special service, and the current reverend spoke about the enduring power of commitment and choice. He talked about how Ethan and Natalie's decision to trust each other, to build something together from nothing, had created ripples that extended far beyond their own lives. They could not have known, he said, that their choice would affect so many people, would create so much good in the world. But that is the nature of love and commitment. We plant seeds not knowing what kind of forest might grow. The celebration was covered by local newspapers and even made it into a few national publications. The romantic story of the cowboy and the abandoned bride captured people's imagination, especially in a time when divorce rates were climbing, and the institution of marriage itself seemed under assault. Here was proof that marriage could work, that commitment could last, that love could grow even from the most unlikely beginnings. Young couples read the story and took inspiration from it. Some made pilgrimages to Jamestown, wanting to see the church and the ranch for themselves. The Cole family, gracious as always, allowed respectful visitors to tour the grounds, though they carefully preserved their privacy in the actual living areas. As the 20th century drew to a close and the 21st began, the Cole Ranch adapted once again. Diversification became key, and the family added ecotourism to their operations, offering guests the chance to experience working ranch life. The original house became a museum of sorts, with guided tours telling the story of Ethan and Natalie, and showing how ranch life had evolved over more than a century. The family also established a foundation in Ethan and Natalie's names, providing scholarships to young people interested in agriculture and supporting programs that preserved family farms and ranches. It was a way of extending their legacy beyond their own descendants, helping ensure that the way of life they had valued would continue for future generations. Through it all, the story remained the same. A woman had been left at the altar, heartbroken and humiliated. A cowboy had walked into the church and offered her a way out. She had said yes to a stranger, and together they had built not just a ranch but a dynasty, not just a marriage but a love story for the ages. The scent of roses no longer mocked anyone in that small white church. Instead, it celebrated the truth that Ethan and Natalie had proven, that sometimes our greatest blessings come from our deepest disappointments, that courage and choice can overcome any obstacle, and that real love is not something you fall into, but something you build, day by day, choice by choice, for as long as you both shall live.